Another thing that we want is branch size. We want these branches, we don't want these branches to be as big as the trunk. What happens when the branches get too big? Is they compete with the trunk. They make the trunk look smaller, actually. Even with good taper will help, but still they start competing with the trunk. They start diminishing the size of the trunk. You see how this trunk just seems to get smaller? All right, it really does. It seems to get smaller. The bigger we make those branches.
So
all right.
If they get like that, you cut them off?
Yeah, and this is the biggest problem that most beginners have. They always want to keep the big stuff. You want to get rid of the big stuff. You want to keep the small stuff. Anything that you can do to improve the scale of everything else to that trunk makes the trunk look what? Bigger. Bigger. Which makes the tree look older. Right. Okay? So we don't want these branches to be so huge that they take away from the rest of the tree. Okay. And the smaller we can make them, but they do have to fit in somewhere. We don't want everything, as Manuel was saying earlier, we just don't want everything to be like little twigs sticking off of it. We do want it to look like a branch. All right. So, ramification and leaf size. Remember I told you that all trees are programmed by nature to grow to a certain height, right? All different species of trees, or different varieties of trees, are programmed by nature to require a certain amount of light receptors, leaves, to be able to support the tree and the root system. There's a balance between that root system and the foliage. Part of the reason this tree stays smaller is because the roots can't support a bigger tree because their growth is confined inside the pot. Okay? Well, if all trees are programmed by nature to require a certain amount of square footage of light receptors here to be able to grow, then we could have a tree that's got 10 one-foot leaves on it. These are big leaves on a little trunk. Doesn't look much like an old tree, does it? But if instead of the yes.
Sorry. So can I interrupt?
Of course.
What happens when I fully defoliate? Is it okay for the root?
Depends.
I do it all the time.
Depends. Do you do it to this?
I haven't done it to this one for a long time.
Okay.
But I have other that are my favorites that I do.
All right. Okay. We're getting right into that. That's a perfect lead in it. I like these segues. All right.
What's that again?
I like these segues. We're getting right into what your question was.
Okay.
All right. So for all these trees, we could have 10 leaves that are a foot in length, square foot in area. Well, rather than having 10 that are square foot, how about if we had 100 that are a tenth of a foot each? Square foot, a tenth of a square foot each. Same amount of light receptor, right? We just got to spread out across more leaves. How about if instead of we had 100, we had 1,000? You guys do the math, all right? I don't know where all the decimal places go into placement, all right? How about if we had 10,000 leaves? How about 100,000 leaves? All these leaves are getting smaller and smaller, which what? Makes the trunk look bigger. The tree looks older.
That also have to be with the scale.
That's scale and ramification. All right. Well, let's talk about how we get taper and how we get the ramification. Y'all didn't know you were going to have to come to class today and learn hieroglyphics too, did you? All right. Let's talk about the ramification first. How do we get more leaves growing on the tree? How do we get more leaves?
By defoliating.
All right, why does that give us more leaves? Why?
I don't know why.
Then why are you doing it? You're doing something you don't know why you're doing it?
I know. Because they get smaller. That's, I know the result, but I don't know why.
Why?
I don't know why.
When you cut the leaf, I don't know how to do
All right, let's just
it. Say it.
say it.
Yeah, man.
I understand you say it.
Say it in Spanish, Atlantis.
When you cut the leaf off, the leaf have a
It's stem.
No, has a bud.
a branch.
Bud. A bud.
A bud.
A bud.
Thanks.
No, no. He's talking.
No, he's talking about a bud.
A bud.
Okay,
Look at, here's a branch. We got a leaf growing off here. It's got a little stem there called a petiole.
Okay.
This is where we get in the horticultural aspect. I hear all of you, half of you tuning out right now. All right. So we got all these leaves growing out there. That is a leaf, believe it or not. All right. At the base of every one of these leaves, at the base of the petiole, is a little guy there, our little friend named Bud. Now in Budville, everybody's named Bud. Bud, 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 and Bud. Everybody say hi, Bud. All right. Hey, Bud. All right. So we got all these buds there. Now, as Annie said, we come along, we decide we want we don't know why we're doing it, do we, Annie?
No, I have.
Ah, no idea, but we're going to do it anyways, right?
Yes.
All right. The hell with the consequences. We're just going to do it, right? All right. We're going to come through and we're going to cut off all these leaves. Annie comes through and she defoliates her tree. She doesn't know why, but she knows she likes to do it.
Hours.
Takes hours. Had no idea why she's doing it, but she does it. Well, when we cut those leaves off, we got a bare branch, but our friends Bud are still there. Say hi, Bud. Thank you. All right. What do you think happens to Bud when you cut all those leaves off? He grows what? What grows there?
Smaller leaf.
Smaller leaf?
New branch.
A new branch. Instead of getting a leaf, you get a branch. And all those branches, instead of having 4 leaves, now each one of those branches has leaves that equal the same surface area. Remember, we don't need any more. The roots can't support anymore. We got the same surface area, but instead of having 4 leaves, we've now got 16 leaves on these branches. Probably going to be a lot more than that, actually. But for the sake of our argument here right now, we got 16 leaves instead of 4. And they're a quarter of the size. That's why you defoliated your tree. To get more branching, to get more ramification, to get more leaves, to work on that scale, to make the trunk look what? Bigger. To make the tree look older. And we call this ramification and taper. Most important word in bonsai, taper, 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 taper. Remember that? Everything else takes care of itself. Taper is a little shorter and easier in ramification, and it means more to us in the long run. It's going to mean more to us. All right, so Annie says, that was cool. I don't know why I did it, but it was pretty cool. I'm going to do it again. Because she's just real adventurous at heart. She's a go-getter. She's a daredevil. She says if once is good, twice has got to be better. So she cuts off all those branches, and at the base of all those petioles we had what?
Bud.
Hey, Bud! All right. So, and all those buds get active. And instead of having 16 leaves, we've got how many leaves?
Minus 64.
64 in this argument, that's right. So we got, you draw them, come here. 64 leaves. Draw 64 leaves on here, all right? Because each one of these is going to have 4 instead of just the 1. You know what? I should make you guys sit here and watch me do this all day.
That's what you want.
That, because no matter how many times you do it, you still get the square footage of this.
Right. The same surface area. The same amount of surface of light receptors to take care of those roots. Now, of course, there are limits. But sometimes you can be very surprised by what those limits are. Ficus retusa out in nature can have leaves that are this big. Growing it in a pot, defoliating it, increasing the amount of branching, all right, and everything else. These leaves are actually big. This whole tree, if she worked it a lot, could have leaves that on it that are this big all over. Taiwan are really meticulous about this. It's amazing the size of the leaves. Little bitty leaves like this on trunks this big, trees about this tall, coming up like a banyan style. Take your breath away. Just amazing. Spectacular trees.
How often can you do it?
Depends on the species.
Ficus?
Depends on the species.
Okay.
That one, probably 3 or 4 times a year.
That much?
Right. This one,
Benjamina? Yeah.
Benjamina, you should never do it probably.
Really?
You can kill a Benjamina. Benjaminas don't like it. Now here's the trick with Benjaminas. If you do it to one branch, you're probably going to kill that branch. Benjaminas don't like being defoliated. You always have to leave growth, green on the end. On the very end, leave a couple leaves. Take everything else off, but leave a couple leaves on the end.
Will they get you?
But here's the trick. If you do the whole tree at the same time, I mean just like sit down and do it all in one sitting on a Benjamina, usually it'll flush back and it'll come back and you won't have a problem. And that's probably why you haven't had a problem, is because you've done it all at one time. But if you came in and you did half the tree today, and then about a week you did the other half of the tree, you're going to lose branches. But if you just come in and you do it all at once, it'll probably pop back and the leaves will be smaller because they have more branching.
What about Nerifolia?
Nerifolia is no problem. Retusa, no problem.
Just a Benjamina.
Just a Benjamina.
I have all kind of ficus.
Yeah, and Benjamina, too little's even worse. Too little's even worse.
Too little. Do you mind if I interrupt?
No,
I'm having a horrible trouble with too little.
I said they're worse.
I
Yeah,
have gorgeous too little, and then they decide, okay, yeah,
Yeah.
enough. I'm not a too little anymore, and there comes the huge leaf.
yeah, because they're reverting.
And it seems as
Usually
though-
what will happen is it won't happen on a branch that's already too little, but what will happen is it'll put out a new branch, and that new branch is the big leaves.
it decides, and then
Yeah.
it looks as if the tree has been grafted. Because
Yeah.
they're completely two different.
Yeah, it's reverting. Yeah, it's reverting back, and they tend to do that.
What?
And you know why? Because let me tell
I
you,
don't know why.
Well-
I don't know why anything.
I got a suspicion about that. There are too littles that are actually a sport, they're a mutation, and they'll stay small. There are other too littles that I believe they've been sprayed to reduce the leaves. They're really just Benjaminas, and they've been sprayed to reduce the leaves. And once that spray quits having its effect on the tree,
Wait,
the-
what?
a growth inhibitor, and once that spray wears off, bloop, they start getting big again. So some of the too littles, I got a suspicion aren't really too littles. That could be totally wrong. I don't know. But I've seen what you're talking about. The whole tree just reverts, and that shouldn't happen because it's a mutation. Most too littles don't do that. They stay small. But I know what you're talking about. Sometimes they'll want to revert back, and the whole tree just starts reverting. You're just like, what the heck's going on?
I know.
I have a suspicion that they aren't really too littles. They're Benjaminas that have been shrunken. So, like a head. Evil work at play.
Okay,
All right.
thank you.
Just, I don't know. Just a guess, all right? All right. So, now we know how to get the leaves smaller. We know how to get more leaves, right? All right, that trunk is looking big now, right? Let's talk about taper. How do we get better taper? You know what? This kind of ties in with it. We could get better taper right here. Notice that we're getting better taper because every one of these branches is going to be smaller than the original branch it was growing off of. So we're getting a little taper, bit of taper there. But let's talk about taper on the trunk. And it applies to the branches too, but let's talk about the trunk. We said a big trunk is the most important thing in bonsai, right? To make it look old. Numero uno, the big kahuna. So we were out there and we find this nice big gnarly trunk. It's got some good roots growing off of it. And it's growing up. Beautiful big old looking trunk. We got a problem though. Has no taper. But we're looking at it. It's got good branching. We always want good branching. Kind of a young tree. It's been growing like crazy. We're saying, wow, that's such a great trunk. I wish I could use that with for bonsai. No taper. So you're just going to walk right by it. You're going to forget about it. Why aren't you? Manuel says no. Let me pull up a chair. I want to hear this. What's going on?
If you are going to let's say that tree is in your house. Let's say that it is in your house, and you are going to enlarge your house, and the tree is in the middle. So you will not. I will not kill the tree. I will not kill and get rid of the tree because the tree will die. So I will cut the tree and placement it in its spot. And I cut the tree near the bottom.
Near the bottom.
Yeah.
Where at? Right here maybe?
Maybe a little bit. Yes.
All right.
Something like that.
All right. And then what happens?
And the tree will grow branches.
Yeah.
Or the tree will not die.
Right.
So maybe I can get a bonsai out of.
All right. So now you got a little short tree right here. It's got a bunch of branches growing off of it where you cut it.
The cut will not be in that little bit higher.
All right, so it's a little bit higher.
Yeah.
I tried to go about where you said over here. All right.
Then you let one branch grow all the way up until the branch matches the.
Very good. He's exactly right.
I will do that to save the tree. If the tree is